It is our greatest pleasure that to deliver the M.V.Keshav Memorial Foundation Day lecture, we are joined by His Grace, Sri Chanchalapathi Dasa, Vice Chairman and Co-Mentor, Global Hare Krishna Movement, President, Vrindavan Charnodaya Mandir, Senior Vice President of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and Vice Chairman of the Akshay Patra Foundation, and above all, a true philanthropist at heart. We request Prabhuji to grace the occasion with his profound wisdom.
Hare Krishna and Namaste to everybody. Very happy to be amidst very distinguished professors, the director of the institute, distinguished alumni of the institute, and previous faculty members and students here. Also very happy to hear about the founding principle of the institute and in memory of whom we are having this lecture. As a young student in college, I was very fascinated by science, and I continue to be fascinated by science. At a certain point in my life, I became introduced to Indian spirituality, and I pursued that while I was still in the college. And at a certain point of time, I was so fascinated by the concepts, by the promise, by the understanding of Indian spirituality that at some point of time, I plunged into it as a full-time activity. When I look back, I sometimes wonder, I had never expected that I would be in an attire like this, because I was so passionate about science and research, and I wanted to be something else, but destiny brought me to this field. So I want to share with all of you some of the exciting things that I discovered as a student of science and that transformed me to become a student of spirituality. Nearly 60 or 70 years ago, Albert Einstein made a statement. He said, I'm not really interested about this phenomena or that phenomena, this equation or this spectrum of a certain element. These are all details. I want to understand how God created this universe. I must be 90% accurate in my recollection of this quote. About 7 decades later, Another eminent scientist of our world, Stephen Hawking, made a slightly different statement. Even when I was in college, I used to hear about an important subject that scientists were working on, a cutting edge subject of research, which continues to be an important subject of research. And those days it was called the grand unification theory. Scientists had identified 4 fundamental forces which has made the universe and all of us as we see it now. And the scientists have been endeavoring, if it is possible, to unify all of these 4 forces into one single force, which has led to the 4 forces, and those 4 forces has led to the universe that we see today. And this grand endeavor has been called the grand unification theory. However, recently, Stephen Hawking renamed this attempt and called it the theory of everything. Because he believed that if we were able to find that one single force which has led to everything, this would constitute the theory of everything. The very well-known book by Stephen Hawking, I think it's an international bestseller. And although it's an international bestseller, I think many people have bought the book, but very few people have read the book. I have 3 copies of the book. Different people presented that to me at different times. In the last chapter of the book, called the conclusion, and in the last paragraph of the last chapter of the book, Stephen Hawking sums it in this way. He says, if we were to discover the theory of everything, and that theory must be simple and elegant, that not only scientists can understand that, but even non-scientists and common people can sit around the table and must be able to discuss that theory of everything. If we are able to do that, that will be the highest triumph of human intellect, for we would have understood why the universe exists and why we exist. For then we would have known the mind of God. Once again, at least 90% accurate quote from my recollection. What I wanted to point out was, Einstein had asked the question how God created this world. Stephen Hawking, 70 years later, asked another penetrating question: why God created this universe and all of us. Einstein's was a how question. Stephen Hawking's was a why question. In my studies of the Vedanta philosophy, which was summarized by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, I was astounded to find that these questions about why the universe exists and why we exist is the core of the Vedanta philosophy. The methodology, the processes, the hermeneutics, the epistemology, and the approach is different in Indian Vedic knowledge system. But the intent has been the very same intent. Yet another scientist, Paul Davis, he wrote in a book, scientists study the universe. There are different departments and different branches of science and engineering in which we study and understand and try to use all of that understanding to make human life better. Paul mentions, but there is a fundamental question. The scientists study the universe. The fundamental question is, why does the universe exist for the scientist to study? Why does the universe exist? Why nothing exists? Why isn't it that nothing exists at all? The universe exists and the scientist studies that. In fact, the scientist studies the universe in a certain way. The engineer manipulates the universe in a certain way for the betterment of human life. An economist studies the distribution and creation of wealth for the benefit of human society in yet another way. A historian studies the universe to understand the course of humanity, what things happened well, what went wrong. Like this, all of these different branches of knowledge study the universe, and the fundamental question remains, why does the universe exist for all of us to study from different perspectives? When I look at this profound question from the Vedanta perspective, in fact, this question has many more nuances. For example, we are talking about a scientist who is studying the universe and asking the question, why does the universe exist? In fact, implicit in the question, but not so carefully thought through, but which becomes more visible and clear from the Vedanta perspective is, we are asking another question, why does the universe exist? And why does the scientist exist primarily who is studying the universe? Actually, this brings another important distinction. There is a universe, and the scientist is studying the universe. The scientist, for him to study the universe, should also exist, but has another dimension of reality. He is able to study the universe. In other words, we are not only existing, we are also conscious entities who are able to be aware of the existence of the universe, and we can also be aware of the existence of ourselves. So in other words, there is existence and there is existence of consciousness which is aware of the universe. Now, why all these things exist is the fundamental question. Another brilliant scientist, Carl Sagan, he mentions, he asks a very fundamental question. he traces the history of humanity and says that how human beings, this is the Western perspective of history, which is debated, and I'll not go into that debate. But the understanding is that primitive people started as hunters, gatherers, and then agrarian civilizations began, and then different kinds of development of human civilization happened, and people have become more and more informed and aware from the Dark Ages to the Enlightened period. And so human awareness and human intelligence has been growing, and human understanding of our own world and our civilization has been improving. And now Carl Sagan asks an important question. Is there a limit for development of human intelligence and human cognition? Or is there a limit? In fact, this question is also an important question that comes up in the Vedanta philosophy. Is there a limit to human cognitive powers? Or human cognitive powers are unlimited to comprehend many more things? From the Vedic perspective, these questions take on another kind of a significance. I'll give another example. From science, we know a chimpanzee, or even for that matter, dogs, they are all mammals, and we all have a similar neuroanatomy. We have a two-lobed brain, we have a vertebrae, we have a nervous system which is developed, and we understand that this nervous system is the hardware infrastructure that gives us awareness and the cognition of the world around us. Now, if you see the neuroanatomy of a chimpanzee or a dog or a human being, all of these are pretty evolved. Say, for instance, I had a dog or a chimpanzee in front of me, and I'm trying to explain to them how we have a democratic system of government. We elect our chief minister and our prime minister every 5 years by an electoral process. Do you think I'll be able to make a dog or a chimpanzee understand any of these concepts? The chimpanzee has 99% similar DNA as we have. But although our DNA is 99% similar, a chimpanzee is 100% beast. No, someone may say, no, if you try to explain it a little more carefully, and the chimpanzee may understand our political process. But it is not so. It is just like, suppose I have a mobile phone. Sometimes I get an email with some of our people in our organization, and they send me an AutoCAD drawing, and I don't have an AutoCAD loaded in my mobile, and I try to open that, and simply it doesn't open. My mobile is not enabled to open an AutoCAD file. So in the same way, our neuroanatomy, is it capable to understand all aspects of reality? Or we can understand certain aspects. Maybe there are a lot more aspects which are inaccessible to our cognitive system. Just like a dog or a chimpanzee's cognitive systems don't allow them to understand what is very important for us in a democratic government. Another example is, it is said that there are certain insects, they only have two-dimensional cognition. An ant, for instance, is crawling, can understand its movement forward and left and right, but has no cognition of a third dimension above it. And we as human beings have a cognition of three-dimensional space. Is it that the space is limited to 3 dimensions, or it is our limitation? Of course, in science and in engineering and in mathematics, we use additional dimensions of space. Although we are not able to perceive it, we can play around with it with mathematics. We can talk about a hypersphere. We can talk about hyperspaces. But there is something that we cannot perceive. It is beyond our powers of perception. So we live in a world today where science and technology has advanced, and especially in the last 20 years or 15 years, the revolution that science and technology has brought about is truly earth-shaking. I come across young people and young parents who say that our children, even when they wake up in the morning, first thing is they look for a gadget and they start playing with it. So, as children, they are very proficient to use the gadgets. But by the time they become teenagers, they are having depression. We come across another kind of a situation among young people. They have a kind of a challenge they face, and they call it overthinking about everything. And doctors say that because they have been exposed to too much of information, and all of this is actually causing them stress. We also know that some of the brightest minds in our country, they go to the brightest institutes. And sometimes after they reach there, they are not able to cope with the pressure. And sometimes they take a very drastic step of ending their lives, which is very saddening, isn't it? Recently, I met one retired judge of a high court, and he was telling that in all the metros in our country, in all the family courts in the metros of our country, there are increasing cases of divorce. So, we come across this kind of a situation where we have on the one hand, there is science and technology, and on the other hand, we have economic development. But there is something that is not making our people very happy and satisfied. They don't have the necessary life skills to navigate through these challenges. Psychologists say if there is a purpose to human life, and that purpose is something that will motivate and can direct us to navigate through all these difficult situations. The Vedanta philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita philosophy, provides a very sublime, intellectually challenging purpose for our lives. To understand why the universe exists, why we all exist, and what is the cosmic and universal arrangement. This pursuit of the purpose of life, as given in our Indian Vedic system, which is intellectually very rigorous. It was developed with elaborate intellectual rigor, with debate and discourse, that can provide such a sublime purpose of life, which is very exciting, that can help us if that purpose of life is the foundation. And whatever we pursue in our life, it could be business, it could be science, it could be technology, it could be economics or political offices, whatever it is, if we are founded, if we are grounded in this pursuit of the highest purpose of life, we will know how to navigate all these challenging situations and make right decisions in our life. We will know how to navigate through difficult circumstances of relationships and how to handle the pressures of the modern world. So, it is the message of our Vedic literatures. This is the contribution of India to the world to provide that sublime purpose of life. Every day in the morning when we wake up, in a few seconds, that sublime purpose of life should energize us so that we can do well in whatever pursuit we are in with noble intentions and do good for ourselves, for our community, for humanity, for the country, and for the world. Our Vedic knowledge provides this, and one can pursue this along with whatever one is doing in one's profession or in one's life. This is the message of the Vedic literatures. Krishna sums it up in a very interesting way in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmaram yudhyacha mayarpita mano buddhir mameva eshyasi asamshayaha. Krishna was speaking this knowledge to Arjuna, and he said, you should practice this knowledge while you are fighting as a warrior. Krishna did not tell Arjuna to not fight and go to the Himalayas and do something else. He said, you be in the battlefield, do your duty as a warrior, and at the same time, you should have a spiritual purpose and objective in life. This is the great message of our Vedic literatures. Thank you very much. Namaste. Hare Krishna.